Did you know that it was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492? So that's why it was a Spanish colony. And if you ever go there, you'll see signs like Puerto Rico. It's got all the Spanish type architecture, and everybody speaks Spanish. So it was a Spanish colony until the Spanish-American War of 1898, when it became part of the U.S. How many of you remember the Maine? The cry, "Remember the Maine," the battleship that was blown up in Havana Harbor. That was basically what drew the U.S., what drew us into that Spanish-American War. So we sided with Cuba in their war for independence from Spain, and they were given that in 1902 from the U.S. as well. And we remained very influential in Cuba until 1959, when guerrillas led by Fidel Castro took over, and they had the communist revolution. So Cuba is now a socialist communist government. It's a socialist state run by the Communist Party. And having lived in Miami, I was looking for good Cuban food here where I am right now, which is around Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach area in Florida. And this guy is a friend of mine. He unfortunately is very busy with his restaurant, which is El Ambia. And he was going to try and join us, but he couldn't make it, I don't think, unless he calls in a little bit later. But he has the most amazing Cuban food and the most amazing story about how he fled Cuba. He was an airline pilot, and he was flying over to Europe a lot. So he was very familiar with all the European countries. And on one occasion, the Cuban government made him take a plane that he didn't think was airworthy, but he had to fly it. And he landed an emergency landing in Spain. And the reporters were there and asking him questions because he was Cuban and he had an emergency landing. And during that interview, he made some comments the Cuban government did not like. So unfortunately in Cuba, freedom of speech is not really common. It's not like it is here. You cannot disparage the government. You cannot say anything negative about the government. But he did make some negative comments about the government, and they wanted to put him in jail. So he also had some family history where the Cuban government had basically killed his father, taken his father and put him in a work camp. So he was not a friend of the Cuban government. And he decided, instead of going to jail, he was going to take a plane, since he knew how to fly, and 60 passengers that wanted to get out of Cuba as well. And he flew to Miami. So that is his story. And he has been a very successful restaurateur and chef and a great guy. So it's too bad he wasn't here, but I wanted just to share his story with you. And there's so many other Cubans here in the US, especially in Miami and Florida, that have similar stories of how they got out of Cuba. Again, Cuba is a socialist state run by the Communist Party, which is the only party allowed. Before the revolution, the standard of living was far better for Cubans than most other Latin American countries before Castro, and now most Cubans are pretty poor. So Castro did not make good on his claims. So a few more things before and after Fidel. As you can see, the photos. There was a lot of corruption from the mafia and the US being over in Cuba, but, and that was part of the platform that Fidel ran on, but Cubans were better off, actually. Most Cubans were way better off than they are today. So today they have loosened up restrictions a little bit for Cubans to interact with international tourists. However, most of the people that you're going to interact with if you go to Cuba are taxi drivers and hotel or restaurant workers. And they have, you know, very few hotels, very few restaurants that are, you know, state sanctioned that you can stay at or go to. And grocery stores, very little on the shelves. The infrastructure is poor condition. Don't expect to make cell phone calls because there's little connectivity and very little internet connectivity. Transportation before and after Fidel is about the same. You can find ox-drawn carts still today, and tuk-tuks, those little, kind of like a little taxi. Those are kind of fun. But you can see in the architecture, it's very colonial Spanish looking. And if you go out, if you happen to go to Cuba, you definitely want to bring your own toilet paper because if they have the toilet paper in the bathrooms, you're going to have to pay for it. And it's usually subpar toilet paper. In addition to that, you're going to want to take water with you from the hotel because it's hard to find after you leave the hotel. And there are hours posted for museums and things like that, but whether or not they stick to those hours, it's very unpredictable. So I've had friends that have traveled down there, and a lot of people travel down there from here now because the restrictions have loosened up, but the Cuban people are really living the same as they did before under Fidel, which is very restricted. So let's take a look at the cuisine. Most Cubans, the staple dishes are black beans and rice, and also plantains. And we're going to look at a couple different ways to use plantains. I hope you all were able to find them. And I'm going to show you, if you all can see, these are some plantains. These are the ripe ones, and these are the green ones, the unripe ones. These are for tostones and the plantain cups, and these are what are called made into maduros. And they're really like candy. They're so sweet and delicious when they're fried up, which we're going to do today. So before we begin, I just want to make sure that you take a look at some mise en place. So after I retired from the Air Force, I went to culinary school. And one of the things in the 2 years that I went through culinary school that I learned is to make sure your mise en place is good to go. Mise en place means everything's in place. So that means that you have everything set before you start to cook. So, for example, this is for the plantain cups and the sour orange mojo. So everything's cut up. First, we're going to do maduros. So let's take a look at the maduros and what you want to do. So I have some ripe ones, and I'm going to cut them at a bias, but I want to peel them first, just like a banana. These ones are easy to peel. Got my peel off. And I just want to, like I said, cut it on the bias, which is at an angle, because that way they're going to get really nice and crunchy and caramelized. And I'll show you how to do the unripe plantain, the tostones. These are a little bit harder to cut and get the skin off, but all you do is you cut the ends off, and they're hard, and you want to cut them in about 1.5 to 2 inch slices. We're going to do the Maduro first. And I have set up, again, mise en place, I have my spider. This is what I fish them out with. I have my cookie sheet with paper towels on it, ready to drain them. And then also for the plantain cups, I have one of these citrus juicers. But you could also use a muffin tin and like a muddler or something that would push the plantains down into the muffin tin. So I also have a tostonera, which is what I'm going to make the tostones with. I cover mine with some saran wrap, so it's easier to clean because the tostones will stick to it. The plantains will stick to it. If you don't have a tostonera, that's no problem. This is another method you can use. You can just smush it with 2 plates or coffee cups. So that's, you know, no biggie if you don't have the actual tostonera or the other equipment. This I got in Puerto Rico, and this is to make plantain cups. So you put your once fried tostone in there, and then voila, that's a plantain cup. Okay, so first off, I'm going to make the maduros. So being really careful, making sure there's no water, because oil and water are going to splatter, and you don't want to get burnt. See, there they are. And now, while that's going on, I'm going to get my plantain tostones ready. And the maduros probably will take a couple minutes. So I just want them to get really caramelized, and you'll see how nice and brown they look. And I'll turn them probably once or twice during that, probably depending on your fryer and how much oil and how hot it is. Mine's 350, but that always varies. So you just have to watch them and flip them occasionally. I'm going to do the maduros first, and then I'm going to do the tostones. So I've got garlic. I'm just going to do basically for my husband and I. So I'm just going to make it for 2 people. And the sour orange is actually a combination of, if you don't have sour orange where you live, that's not a problem. Or lemon, it's either one, it's gonna work. And then you add some oil, salt and pepper. And what else did it say? Now, if you don't want to make that, you can just buy this. So I'm just going to shake this really good and add that. Because it does have vinegar, and I do like vinegar. So again, recipes are a starting point. This is just a starting point for you to experiment with what you like. If you like vinegar or you don't like vinegar, then you add or subtract accordingly. So I'm going to check my tostones. And they are looking good, but they got a ways to go still. I'm going to flip them, and I'm using tongs, but to get them out, I will be using the spider. Okay. So I'm going to set that aside and work on my avocado and shrimp for the plantain cups. So I've got avocado here, and I've got some olive oil in there, and I'm going to add my lime juice, 2 tablespoons, and a little shallot. This is kind of like guacamole. Again, you can make it your own by, if you don't like something like shallots or red onions, then don't add it. Jalapeno, cilantro, and garlic, in addition to salt and pepper. So again, because it's like guacamole, again, some people like a lot of garlic, some people don't like a lot of garlic. Okay, and then you just mix that together, and then your avocado is done. Your avocado salad. And again, you can mash it or keep it in chunks, up to you. I kind of like mine chunky, so I'm just gonna mash a little of it. Okay, so that is ready. So now my shrimp are the next thing I have to get ready. I'm just gonna add some salt and pepper to this and set it aside. So my shrimp, I've deveined most of it, but I still have 2 left. I'm gonna check on my tostones once more, and they're looking pretty good. They're looking nice and much browner. So they're almost ready. So the shrimp, I have a special seafood cutting mat that I keep for that. So I just take the legs off and the body shell first, and then I squeeze the tail and it comes right out. So then I take my knife and I go down the back, and you're basically taking the digestive tract out of the shrimp. So you can see that this little shrimp has a little black line in it, and that's what you want to remove. So you just grab it and pull it out, and that's deveined. So I have one more. Okay, so my shrimp are ready, and I'm going to check on my maduros because I think they're ready too. I can't wait to eat them. And if you want to sprinkle them with a little sugar or a little salt, go ahead. So now I am going to put in my tostones. And you want to just let those go till they're brown on one side, and then flip them over and they'll brown on the other side. And while they're doing that, I'm going to start my shrimp. It's really important that you cook this over really low temperature, because a lot of people get tough shrimp because they cook it too high. So I'm going to just turn this on low, about medium, low, low, and that garlic is going to infuse its flavor into the butter. I like to always add like a teaspoon of olive oil because that keeps the butter from burning. So I've got my butter bath waiting for my shrimp. So I'm going to put my shrimp in there. So I'm just laying my shrimp in there, but lobster would work, you know, anything that goes with like a avocado, refreshing avocado, like crab would work. So those are a few other substitutions you could use. So I'm just going to let that go for right now. And I'm going to come back here and check on my tostones. So I'm going to flip them over because it's probably time because I think they're going to be nice and brown on one side. And you're gonna need to watch your whatever, if you have a lid on, it's gonna have water, so that and oil don't mix again, so you want to be careful. So I'm just gonna flip them. They're not really brown, they're just kind of nice yellow golden. And they look like this. This is one that I did earlier. So it's just nice and yellow. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next. Now I'm going to make the tostones, and these are just basically flat little chips that look like this. So how you get that shape, again, is a couple different ways. You can use this tostonera right here, which I'll show you how that works. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to put one of the already once fried tostones in the tostonera, and I'm going to press down on it, which mashes it into a nice circle shape. If you want to use the plate method or the cup method, again, grab a plate or 2 plates, grab a nice coffee cup with a flat bottom, put the tostone on a plate, and press down. But I got a lot of water going on, so I'm going to take this off. See what I mean? Be careful. All right, so these are good to drain. I'm going to put the ones that I've already smashed back in there. So now these are in there. I'm not going to put the top on because it has condensation, which is causing it to spatter. So my tostones are cooking. I'll show you what that looks like. And my shrimp is cooking. So I'm going to use my tongs and turn my shrimp. Okay, so I've got my tostones almost ready to take out. I'm going to make a couple of more tostones to make into plantain cups, and I'll show you how to do that. So, in a plantain cup, I'm going to use the citrus masher, okay? So I'm going to put the once fried tostone in the citrus masher, and I'm going to kind of mold it into a cup shape. And that's kind of tricky because they're kind of, you know, they like to move around. So you just squeeze it, get it in there, and boom, there's your nice little cup, okay? So you're gonna fry that again. So I got my second in here. I've got a nice little cup. See that? Isn't that pretty? And that's what you're gonna put the avocado salad and your shrimp in, okay? My plantain cups I'm gonna fry as well. So while they're frying, I'm gonna check my shrimp again. And it looks really good. Everybody can see that? They're about done. So by the time my plantain cups are ready, my shrimp's gonna be ready. And like this one, If you put this in a muffin tin, you'd shape it and then you'd fry it again. Okay, so I'm going to put this one in too. So right now they're frying away in my deep fat fryer. Okay, and then I'm going to flip them. So I have a muffin cup right here and a muddler. So this is the muddler, and you just basically use the muddler. Once you kind of flatten the tostone, you use the muddler to make it flat or to make your cup shape. So I'm gonna flatten it a little bit first. So basically you just, put it in your muffin tin and use a muddler to make the little cup shape. My tostones, and I think they're ready. So I'm gonna take them out. Right, so I've got my plantains out of the oil, so I'm gonna do some quick salting of them. And they're gonna drain a little bit. Okay, so I've got my maduros here, and I've got I'm going to plate my tostones as well. And I'm going to plate my maduros also. See how nicely caramelized that is? It's so crunchy and delicious. So you can put a little bit of salt on those too, just, depending on your taste. But they're perfectly good without any salt on them. So my maduros are ready. And my tostones, I'm going to plate them. So let's return over to the cutting board. Okay, so I've got my shrimp all cooked and done. So what I want to do is plate this. Okay, so my tostones have their dipping sauce. They're good to go. And my plantain cups, I just fill with the salad and some shrimp. And that is ready to go. And there it is. Voila.